when people,
Okay.
they go, oh, I'm going to start time boxing. So they allocate a time box for like every 7-minute window of their life. And if you go for a poo that's slightly too long, that's it. You've fucked your day.
Welcome back to the Propane Business Podcast. I'm here with in-house propane business productivity expert Yusuf, and today we are going to be talking about how to find free time. And Yusuf has 5 really good tips for this. So yes, Yusuf, if you want to just talk about tip number 1, we might as well get right into it.
Let's do it. This is exciting being interviewed on our own podcast. So if you don't know me, I set up and run Propane Business and Propane Fitness along with Johnny a long time ago, about 10 years ago, while doing a medical degree and working full-time as a doctor. So over time, I've made a lot of mistakes and I've learned a thing or two about managing your time. So I want to try and share you with
Share.
some of the mistakes that I've learned and some ways that you can fast track your way to this. I think this is particularly poignant this year where everybody is, well, if you're self-employed, you have no boundaries on your time anymore. During lockdown, as Alex just said before, the bedroom and the office are the same thing. And you end up very easily just Parkinson's law into your whole day. You know, that any tasks you have just fill up the entire time that you allocate to them. So we want to be able to have some very clear boundaries with when you're working and when you're not working. And really everything stems from there. So tip number 1 is to have time boxes. This is creating a window of time in your calendar where there is a clear outcome for each block of time. So this comes from Cal Newport and many others, where you actually see your day as a visual calendar scroll, and you can do this with a pen and paper, or you can do it on an app. My choice of app is TickTick, and you literally just drag out a block of time, and it's like, right, I'm beginning that now. I'm going to set the analog Pomodoro timer.
Very nice.
And there you go. You've just being able to do what you're doing is half the battle, but also being able to not do what you're not doing. And that's something that I think all of us struggle with a lot more than we think, because we've got this big burden of all the things that we should be doing at some point, and we try and either do them all at once, or we have our inbox open or our notifications open, and you try and do one thing, but then also other things are also, oh, but they're also productive, and that also counts as work. And it's not really procrastination because you're not kind of messing about, but you're just not getting any one thing done. You're just getting 1% progress in 100 things. So the solution to all of that, tip number 1, time box, clear outcome for each block of time.
Yes. And just to dive into that a little bit more, because it's always the case of you can create time boxes and you can write them out. But how do you make sure that you actually adhere to the time box? You know, obviously you might be like, oh, from 1 to 2, I'm doing this. And then life gets in the way, you know, your dog gets sick or, you know, stuff changes. How do you navigate that whilst trying to adhere to time boxes without it, you know, being like, well, it's all ruined now.
Yeah,
You
very,
know,
very
I've
good
had
question.
a couple of
So
minutes. Yeah.
overscheduling is the main error there. When people,
Okay.
they go, oh, I'm going to start time boxing. So they allocate a time box for like every 7-minute window of their life. And if you go for a poo that's slightly too long, that's it. You've fucked your day. So you really have to have that's going to make it into the trailer, isn't it?
Yeah.
So you got to have at least a 15-minute window on either side of each time box to give yourself some buffer time. If your dog gets sick or whatever, you have to be able to move these things around and have some flexibility. But also realize that some tasks may take a bit longer than expected. Most tasks will actually. To do any task that requires focus, you usually need 25, 30 minutes just to get into the zone, and then a further 35, 40 minutes to actually make some progress in it. So trying to keep your time boxes as big as possible is actually really helpful. Because if you can dedicate 3 hours at a time to a single task and a single project, creating your lead magnet or writing out marketing emails or something, and batch them all, you get into the flow and you'll get much more done in those 3 hours as one block than you would from doing 3 1-hour blocks.
Yeah. No, I think that that's a really good point, and that's, I mean, just so people know, I kind of I've done a degree in writing, and that's a big practice that writers use as well. So normally, like, it, you might take 45 minutes of staring at a blank page, but then that 45th minute, the next 5 minutes, you write more than you wrote in the last hour or so, and that's that's a very important part of, I think, any process of creating something, whether or not it's a business or whether or not it's a fun story, or whatever it is. Um, you do have to allow for some time to get the gears in your brain turning and get yourself directed towards that task.
Such a good point, especially with writing, where that's something where you can't force it. Like there's a creative element to it, and you've got to get your mind and your gears of your brain into that flow. And I call it the sphincter, because this is, you sit down to try and work, and there is a sphincter. There's like a push where you're like, oh, I'm not quite feeling in the groove, and then suddenly, boom, you're through the sphincter, you're deep into the anal canal or the rectal shelf, and it's beautiful, and you're smoothly gliding along. But you do have to initially push through that force of the sphincter to break through the messy mind that happens when you first sit down at your desk.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think, obviously, we're talking about it in terms of writing, but how relating that to the personal training context, if it's, for example, coming up with your content for, social media or anything like that, doing that in a 3-hour batch, you'll be surprised that, come at, you might be like, oh, struggling for an hour or two. But if you do it all in that 3 hours, then as opposed to like thinking about it all week, dealing with that weight, getting it done that batch is not only more time efficient, just in that you're going to generate more ideas once you get to hour two, and you're like, oh, I can see like 6 different paths I can go down here. And you're also just not going to have the weight of it on you for the rest of the week. So it's going to make the other time boxes easier to complete.
Yeah, absolutely. There's nothing worse than just an unfinished task that's always looming over you. I scheduled 419 Instagram posts over a couple of weeks, just during I had some night shifts that weren't that busy. So I brought my laptop and just was like, right, I'm just going to absolutely bash out Instagram scheduling. And it was really unpleasant, but that's over a year of Instagram content now.
Are we still on the night shift posts?
Oh, yeah, we will be for another 10 months or so.
So if you want to see Yusuf's midnight 2 a.m. delirium, definitely follow Propane Fitness on Instagram.
Just read the captions. You'll be like, what? Oh, okay,
Well,
now I get it.
so that's actually, to be fair. So for anyone that hasn't followed the Propane Instagram, Yusuf has some incredible captions. That are these ones you've made up in a kind of night shift stupor?
Some of them. So they're usually the Fitspo quotes on Johnny's lifting videos. So now anyone who's listening to this has seen Behind the Fourth Wall, and they realize that this isn't actually Johnny speaking. This was Yusuf on a night shift from.
Dun, dun, dun.
I feel
But
like I'm
yes.
really revealing trade secrets here.
But yes, let's get back to the how to get more free time. So number one, time boxing.
That's it.
Number two.
Number two is your internal and external working space.
Mhm.
So internal we'll get to in tips 3 and 4, but external is just your desk setup. You've got to have a clear desk. Don't have loads of crap on it, because that opens up open loops in your brain of things that that you need to get done at some point. Like, oh, there's those papers on the desk here, and there's an empty bowl of whatever, and you've got to be able to just completely clear that stuff out and just have the thing that you're working on the desk. And that reminds me, there's an app called Next Meeting, which gives you the task that you're meant to be doing in the time box, because it synchronizes with your calendar, and it makes the top of your menu bar just the text that says that task. So it's just another reminder of, like, if you're going off task, then it goes, you're a twat. Hey, here's the task you're supposed to be doing. So it's really about, like, minimizing anything that's in your peripheral vision, internally and externally, so that you can really zone in on that one thing. And an extension of that is getting rid of notifications. I can't believe people in 2020 that still have notifications for, like, words with friends on.
It's insane. It's absolutely wild. I think, like, I mean, that's definitely a bit of advice I took from you, and like the amount of like mental RAM that freed up I mean, I'm also like really bad with notifications. I think that, I mean, I like playing games and like all that stuff. So like the dopamine hit of like a notification or a number popping up, um, that really gets me. So yes, turning off notifications can free up so much space and stop you from getting distracted within those time boxes, or just when you're generally trying to do anything useful at all. Like,
100%. I'm so glad it's been a improvement, and it's painful to do because we're losing a little source of dopamine that we're used to getting,
yeah.
but it's never satisfying, is it?
No, and like 99.9% of notifications are useless. I think the only thing to kind of counteract that is in the personal training stuff. And if you're running an online personal training business, obviously you need some kind of notifications at times, but just be very conscious about which those are. So if you have contact with clients via messaging, which we suggest only for a kind of a higher price, but that's a different conversation. But if you have that, then make sure that's in one app as opposed to in WhatsApp or in like texts, because then you're getting notifications of your aunt, of the group chat sending some weird meme as alongside all of those things, and you're allowing yourself to get sidetracked. Whereas if you had it in one app where that app is the only time that clients message you, then if you have notifications on for that, because you can specify which app you have notifications on for, then you're not going to miss the essential things, but you're also not going to get sidetracked by all the other stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And there's notifications within the app, and that's when you open it and you're using it, and you're like, right. Or there's push notifications, and what we
Yeah,
don't want is something to, unless it's the only ones that I have on are actually the ones for time boxes, because they are the ones that I've put into the system to keep me on track. So yeah, you're right. Using them to your advantage.
100%. So yeah, that's kind of number two to sort of summarize.
Clear your working area.
Yes, as well digital as well as physical.
Exactly. So
Awesome.
we actually have some exercises for that to go through in specific on the members area, members.propanefitness.com, and it's all for free in the gift section if you want to check that out for some step-by-step instructions on how to do that.
100%. And so we've talked about the physical, the digital working space, and you said mental working space that was going to be in points 3 and 4. So
Yeah,
we might as well hop right in there with number 3.
let's do it. So the what I mentioned about open loops, that's the same concept as you get something ping up on your notification because you're an absolute philistine that didn't turn off his notifications, and it says like, hey, can you pick up some milk on whatever. And because you're also a philistine, you're physically going to the shops and buying milk rather than having asked a delivery. I'm such a dick. But that's created an open loop. You might see the text, put it down, not do anything about it. What's happened there is that you've now created a little thing in the back of your mind that's like, oh, there's a task that hasn't been done yet, but we've not put it into any kind of system, and you might forget, might not. If you forget the milk, then it's a problem. Oh well, back to what I was doing. And that open loop just sits at the back of your mind and creates a level of background stress. The way I like to think of it is, if you've ever played, did you ever play Metal Gear Solid?
I have played one of them, but couldn't get into it because the cutscenes were too long.
They were far too long, and you couldn't skip a lot of them. So on that game, there's a grenade called the chaff grenade,
Yeah.
which blocks the radars of your enemy.
Mhm.
And open loops are like that. They just create this like static in your mind that stops you from being able to see clearly, and they take up mental bandwidth.
Mhm.
So tip number 3 is open up as much mental bandwidth as you can by having a capture process and a review process, so that you can spend as much time as you can doing the task and not having stuff just floating around the back of your mind. And this is the same as the um, don't do what you're not doing idea.
No, awesome. So sort of with that, where would you suggest that? So for example, the milk thing. So obviously that's a notification, but in lockdown, we're all at home for the most part, apart from you in the hospital. Um, but say, for example, your partner walks in and is like, "Oh, we really need to get milk." Now, there's two paths you can take there. there's obviously, well, there's infinite paths you can take, but for the sake of the objective being milk gets handled,
Yeah.
the milk situation is addressed. There's obviously, you can capture that. You can act on it straight away and just like buy it in 30 seconds from, a grocery website, or you could go to the shop, which is obviously the least efficient. How would you figure out, for situation to situation, which of the, what the best course of action is? Because in terms of open loop, even if you capture it, that's still theoretically an open loop.
Yeah.
But if the action took 30 seconds, technically you've closed the loop, but you have got out of your time box. So I know that's a bit in the weeds, but I think it might be useful for people to
Yeah,
hear
no,
a perspective
it's
on that.
worth addressing. So the GTD David Allen Getting Things Done system talks about, as you said, if a task takes less than 2 minutes to do, don't capture it, just do it straight away. Otherwise, you've only captured it properly if you assign it a time and a window and a specific action to do about it. So milk, just the word milk in your reminders is not captured. That's
It's
and
spilled everywhere. It's not in its bottle. It's all over the floor.
it's all over the floor. There's another one for the trailer. There's the story about the programmer who went to the shops and his wife called him and said, "Oh, can you just get a pint of milk? Oh, and if there are any eggs, get 6." And he came back with 6 pints of milk. If function didn't close bracket, terrible. So assign it a specific time box, and in your review process, I have a reminder every day at 8 p.m. to spend 15 minutes reviewing. And it's just like pinging up, looking at all the overdue tasks, anything that hasn't been done, and allocating it a new time window so that if the dog became sick, if I slipped on some milk, whatever, you can then arrange that at a new time. So you are flexible. It's not like you've set up your life where if something goes wrong, you completely lost. You have some flex in the plan.
Definitely. And I think those buffers can be useful for those tasks as well. So, you talked about time boxing, always make sure there's a 15-minute buffer between tasks. If for whatever reason you accumulated, like, even if it's like, it was lunch, so you had that, but then you had to hop on a call with a potential client. So now you've got a bowl of salad on your desk. Like, using that 15-minute buffer to look around and maybe clear that physical space is also a way to maintain that. And then in the evening, because this is all about free time and getting some free time, your free time is actually your free time, and you're not just fixing small fires that you created across the course of the day by not using those 15-minute buffers properly.
Yeah.
Properly. Jesus.
100%.
But yes, so number 4, you also said is another. So closing loops is number 3. Closing loops through a capture process, and that capture process being that the thing you capture has to have an action and a time constraint and a time box assigned to it.
Yep.
Number 4.
Number 4 is take all of the stuff that you need to do with self-development and training and anything that's like included in your kind of life admin, personal growth, personal development stuff, and just get a system in place for it. I don't care what it is. I don't care if you're into journaling or you're into dunking yourself in cold water or going for a run in the morning or whatever it is, but just have it there and stop reading about biohacking and like trying to mess with it. Just pick a process, get it handled, make sure that you're fully on board with it, that you've got it in place, and that if you did it for a year, it would take you to the place that you want to be, to become the person that you want to be, and then just let it go. This is that people listening to this are coaches. They recognize the value in a coach is partly to stop a client from overthinking their training. Yes. And to just be like, look, mate, here's your program, do it. And if you're a good coach and you see a value in what you do, you also probably have a coach, because you recognize that even coaches need coaches, and you need to be able to also free up that mental bandwidth for your own training too. So whatever you need to do, hire a coach, use a process, whatever. The point is autopilot all of your self-development and just set it running.
Yes, 100%. And I think that's where humans slip up the most, is an inability to stick to a process that they emotionally convince themselves is not optimal, for either they're not getting the result quick enough or it's hard. Like
Yeah,
it's one of those
absolutely.
two. Like that's I think the reason that most people, and it's not like about they find the exact success, but like the general notion of getting themselves in a place that is improved. Not like, so say for example, you wanted to, run in the Olympics, you know, there are certain barriers probably genetically that might stop you from getting into that 10-person field. But if you're at where you're at, that's not, doing the process that is the most practiced process to getting there is still going to get you in a much better place than if you try and optimize for that early on.
It's
Um,
it's so funny because it's so easy to see that when we're looking at the example of the Olympic runner or
yeah.
the attempting Olympic runner.
Mhm.
But yet we do it so much with our own training and stuff, especially if we're into diet and training and that, reading about that stuff, and we get really caught in the weeds. But yeah, if we had a client that did that, we would very quickly be like, hey, stop overthinking, just do this. So we just need to apply that to ourselves and turn that mirror onto ourselves, which is often painful.
Exactly. And I think one thing that a lot of business owners and a lot of like self-employed people are really fearful of is like mistakes or not doing it perfectly, because they think that that is going to be fatal. Well, Propane Fitness is an example of you can keep making lots of mistakes and it still works really well.
Oh yeah, we made so many. We did things so backward business wise for the first 5 years,
Yeah.
and if you, as long as you're doing some stuff correctly and consistently, you can always just course correct as you go along.
Yeah, 100%. So
How many people do you coach in the business group that have been like procrastinating on launching their free offer or their service or their challenge because they're afraid that it's not quite perfect or whatever?
exactly, and that's just never going to be it. It's never going to be optimal, or it's never going to be optimal. But if you have a system that is proven to work for a vast majority of people, it will still probably work. And then it's still probably working versus it not being optimal. Like the only options you have there are it probably works, but not in a perfect way, or it works in a perfect way. And both of those are fine.
And
Like both of those
what's
are better than
the one way to guarantee that it won't work at all is not doing
not
it.
doing it, not following a system and not having things in place. And I mean, it's a case of working it and also like getting feedback from a system. So this might go into system design, which is probably going to be a different podcast. So I'm actually going to park that for now.
Nice.
But as a little side note, having a system in place that gives you feedback that you can then make tweaks to, um, from a business standpoint, and also obviously from like a fitness standpoint as well, is the key to making improvement in anything, or a key,
Alex,
not the key. It's not a
you
magic. Yeah.
you've read my mind because that's tip number 5,
Oh, here we
which
go
is,
then.
so yeah, separate planning from execution.
Mhm.
Exactly that thing, which is you can sit and plan something out and yes, try and make it optimal, but give yourself a defined endpoint for like, right, now I'm going to just launch it. I'm just going to deploy it and see what happens. And then run it for 10 weeks, 12 weeks, see how it works. By the end, you've got some data. You've not fucked with it in the meantime. You've just let it run. And then at week 12, you can say, right, here's what's worked. Here's what didn't. Now I'm going to regroup, change what needs to be changed, and then do it again. This applies with training. It applies with trading and investing. If you're changing your trading strategy as you're going along, you get to the end of it and you've made a loss, but you don't know why. Or worse, you've made a massive profit and you don't know why. That's
Yeah, that's
terrible.
dangerous. That's really dangerous.
So, and particularly with launching your online offer, taking what you do as a PT or as a coach and trying to launch it online, but not having a clear marketing plan compared to being able to run your marketing plan in blocks and being like, right, this was my cost per lead. This was the result of this. This was the reach. And here's how I can change it. So that is tip number 5. And by doing that, what you're doing, again, coming back to the whole theme of this podcast, which is freeing up your bandwidth, it
Yeah.
gives you time to think. Because if you're filling up every moment with second guessing your own plan, you're never going to be able to see wood for the see the wood for the trees, see the forest for the trees. You won't be able to see the forest.
Wood for the trees. Well, wood and forest are interchangeable.
Fine. So you'll only see wood. You'll only see trees.
You'll be
No
stuck
forest.
in a tree world. And yeah.
What you need is a helicopter.
That's the top tip you need to take away. To save time, get a helicopter.
Simple.
Free up your time. No, but no, I think that's very important. And really, it is just like, the separating planning from execution is the macro version of closing loops.
Yeah.
It's also, I think, one of the hardest psychological battles that you have in any walk of life, but especially owning a business, where it feels like, oh, if this one, you can have a down day, or you could have a version of something that isn't optimal, or you could have like one complaint out of the 50 clients that are really happy with you, and you can be like, oh God, we need to change everything now. Oh my God, which it's definitely experience I know you and Johnny had early doors.
Oh yeah, and that could be the worst thing that happens. You get one nutter who's complaining about a process that actually 49 out of the 50 love, and that was the most scalable thing. And actually, yeah, the more people that come through your funnel, the as a percentage wise, there's always going to be some difficult person who's going to complain, who might be the vocal minority, but that doesn't mean you should change your funnel.
No,
And it's about
yeah,
having that
so like,
helicopter.
for example, so your program offering, it's group coaching, it's really scalable. You're like, there's no messaging support, and that's just part of it. And, 99% of people absolutely fine with that, all getting results, all loving it. And then one person's like, I thought there would be messaging coaching. You need to do messaging coaching. If you give in to that person, because as opposed to having the whole process and being able to see the process clearly, you're overthinking the micro things and micromanaging each element. If you give in to them, you have drastically changed the course of your business and put a ceiling on the amount of clients that you can handle because of 2% of people that have bought the product. It, from a business standpoint, just refund them, to be honest. Like, it doesn't matter. Like,
Yeah,
because
that's such a good point. Like, what's the time cost that you've suddenly cost yourself now? You're waking up every day now to 500 WhatsApp notifications, rather than if you just refunded those two clients and it would have cost you a couple of £100 and completely capped the problem. And now you've got 100% happy clients with defined times that you can interact with them.
exactly. And then as the business grows, a few more of those unhappy people will come along, but that doesn't mean you're not providing a good service. That just means that, I don't know, for whatever reason, they, either maybe your messaging wasn't clear enough, but it's probably just that they're the kind of person that if they're not seeing instant results might get annoyed or
They're,
might get,
they're often the same kind of people that would write to British Gas and say, like, where's my cake? And you'd be like, what? And they'd be like, well, I expected a cake and you haven't sent me one.
yeah, exactly. And like, you can't help those people anyway. And that's fine. They have some deeper stuff to probably work through. But yes, we're getting a little sidetracked and going into mindset, which we'll definitely talk about in some more podcasts. But hopefully that is an example that illustrates. One thing I did want to talk about in terms of the time boxing and kind of loop back to the beginning is making time boxes for your free time and for your time outside of work. I think that is something that I'm finding crucially important in lockdown and when I'm working from home, is that yes, if you have notifications and you have time boxes for your day, but say you have time boxes for your day and it's all like work related and you don't make time boxes for the play, all that happens is anything that was an open loop, because open loops just happen if you're running a business. Like it just, there's people that you might have been like, oh, when I get paid on Friday, I'll, or anything like that. There's always going to be those things. So if you don't make sure that you're scheduling your playtime, for want of a better word, you're going to actually hamstring yourself. And also doing more work doing sort of weird busy work that you shouldn't be doing because you're meant to be off, or all of that, doing that in the evening is going to make your next day worse because you're more tired, you're less excited, and it can feel, again, it's the same as like planning and execution. It's exactly
100%.
the same thing. Like,
it's not rejuvenating to do half work. And I think you're very good at being able to say, right, I'm switching off now. It's the Cal Newport shutdown routine idea, which is at the end of the day, you take everything that is meant to be done today or unfinished or whatever, you schedule it all out and you go, right, shut down, done, laptop off. If you can't trust yourself to do that, do what Johnny did and download Frozen Turkey, which is an app that literally will not allow you on your laptop. It just shuts it down until the next day.
And then I think in an ideal world, and if you're like financially there, having separate devices for work and for play is also a thing. I
Drug
don't have
dealer
that
mode.
option right now, but you know, when I do, I'll definitely be doing that. That's kind of my next big purchase I'm looking towards after the PS5. But
Nice. Once you start dealing drugs, then
exactly. No, but the genuinely having separate devices and just keeping church and state, apart from each other is a really important principle to live by. It allows you to exist outside of the business. And also it allows you to run the business better because you give yourself these boundaries to actually, work in, and you won't overstress things. And you'll find 99%, I mean, I know, just to peer behind the, curtain a little bit of Propane is, there's been days where Johnny and Yusuf, Yusuf's been in hospital and Johnny's been off, and I've been dealing with a lot of the kind of business side of things. And I think initially that created a lot of anxiety for you two. Am I right in saying that?
yeah, it's always hard to because it's your baby, isn't it? But exactly as you said, like that's
They
the
came back
internal
the
stuff.
next day and it was fine.
Everything was
Everything.
on fire, and we'd somehow invaded China, and yeah,
Exactly. No, like none of that is going to happen, especially if the system you built is built from principles that are effective. And that's the big thing. If the principles you're coming from work, the margins of error, they're there, but they're just a lot smaller.
100%.
Yes.
Wonderful. So to find out more on this or to see how all of this fits together into a full productivity system, I've actually recorded a series just because I got so many questions about how I balanced Propane with medicine and working full time as a doctor that I was like, right, I need to just put this into a process. So you can go on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Propane Fitness, and there is a full 7-part series on exactly how you can implement all of this.